by stealth, and his father, so eagerly did he thirst after the money which seemed to come almost within his grasp now, for his brother-in-law was very ill and breaking more and more every day, never went near him to avoid raising any suspicion. The brother lingered on. Mr. Nickleby's wife constantly urged him to avow their marriage. He peremptorily refused. She remained alone in a dull country house, seeing little or no company but riotous drunken sportsmen. He lived in London and clung to his business. Angry quarrels and recriminations took place, and when they had been married nearly 7 years, and were within a few weeks of the time when the brother's death would have adjusted all, she eloped with a younger man and left him. Here he paused, but Ralph did not stir, and the brothers signed to him to proceed. It was then that I became acquainted with these circumstances from his own lips. They were no secrets then, for the brother and others knew them, but they were communicated to me, not on this account, but because I was wanted. He followed the fugitives. Some said to make money of his wife's shame, but I believe to take some violent revenge, for that was as much his character as the other, perhaps more. He didn't find them, and she died not long after. I don't know whether he began to think he might like the child, or whether he wished to make sure that it should never fall into its mother's hands, but before he went he entrusted me with the charge of bringing it home, and I did so. He went on from this point in a still more humble tone, and spoke in a very low voice, pointing to Ralph as he resumed. He had used me ill, cruelly. I reminded him in what not long ago when I met him in the street, and I hated him. I brought the child home to his own house, and lodged him in the front garret. Neglect had made him very sickly, and I was obliged to call in a doctor, who said he must be removed for change of air, or he would die. I think that first put it in my head. I did it then. He was gone 6 weeks, and when he came back I told him, with every circumstance well planned and proved, nobody could have suspected me, that the child was dead and buried. He might have been disappointed in some intention he had formed, or he might have had some natural affection, but he was grieved at that, and I was confirmed in my design of opening up the secret one day, and making it a means of getting money from him. I had heard, like most other men, of Yorkshire schools. I took the child to one kept by a man named Squeers, and left it there. I gave him the name of Smike. Year by year I paid £20 a year for him for 6 years, never breathing the secret all the time, for I had left his father's service after more hard usage, and quarrelled with him again. I was sent away from this country. I have been away nearly 8 years. Directly I came home again, I travelled down into Yorkshire, and, skulking in the village of an evening time, made inquiries about the boys at the school, and found that this one, whom I had placed there, had run away with a young man bearing the name of his own father. I sought his father out in London, and, hinting at what I could tell him, tried for a little money to support life, but he repulsed me with threats. I then found out his clerk, and, going on from little to little, and showing him that there were good reasons for communicating with me, learnt what was going on, and it was I who told him that the boy was no son of the man who claimed to be his father. All this time I had never seen the boy. At length I heard from this same source that he was very ill, and where he was. I travelled down there that I might recall myself, if possible, to his recollection, and confirm my story. I came upon him unexpectedly, but before I could speak, he knew me. He had good cause to remember me, poor lad, and I would have sworn to him if I had met him in the Indies. I knew the piteous face I had seen in the little child. After a few days' indecision, I applied to the young gentleman in whose care he was, and I found that he was dead. He knows how quickly he recognised me again, how often he had described me and my leaving him at the school, and how he told him of a garret he recollected, which is the one I have spoken of, and in his father's house to this day. This is my story. I demand to be brought face to face with the schoolmaster, and put to any possible proof of any part of it, and I will show that it's too true, and that I have this guilt upon my soul." "Unhappy man," said the brothers, "what reparation can you make for this?" "None, gentlemen, none. I have none to make. and nothing to hope now. I am old in years, and older still in misery and care. This confession can bring nothing upon me but new suffering and punishment, but I make it, and will abide by it, whatever comes. I have been the instrument of working out this dreadful retribution upon the head of a man who, in the hot pursuit of his bad ends, has persecuted and hunted down his own child to death. It must descend upon me too. I know it must fall. My reparation comes too late, and neither in this world nor in the next can I have hope again." He had hardly spoken when the lamp, which stood upon the table close to where Ralph was seated, and which was the only one in the room, was thrown to the ground and left them in darkness. There was some trifling confusion in obtaining another light. The interval was a mere nothing, but when the light appeared, Ralph Nickleby was gone. The good brothers and Tom Linkinwater occupied some time in discussing the probability of his return, and when it became apparent that he would not come back, they hesitated whether or no to send after him. At length, remembering how strangely and silently he had sat in one immovable position during the interview, and thinking he might possibly be ill, they determined, though it was now very late, to send to his house on some pretence. Finding an excuse in the presence of Brooker, whom they knew not how to dispose of without consulting his wishes, they concluded to act upon this resolution before going to bed. Chapter 60